All right, so today we are diving deep into something that's both kind of fascinating and a little unnerving.
Hmm.
The world of cyber attacks. You know those stories you see all the time in the news about
Yeah.
companies or even like entire governments getting hacked?
Right.
It can make you kind of want to toss your phone in the ocean and like live off the grid.
Yeah, it certainly makes you think twice about how you're using technology these days, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And the truth is, these cyber attacks are only becoming more and more frequent and, frankly, more sophisticated every day.
That is exactly why we are digging into this report, Behind the Breach. We're not just sort of looking at what happened, like rubbernecking.
Right.
We want to actually understand what we can learn from these attacks
Yeah.
so we can protect ourselves better.
Yeah. That's critical. It's like studying a blueprint. You can really see the tactics the attackers are using.
Okay, so first things first. This report makes it super clear that these aren't just like a couple kids messing around in their basements. We're talking highly organized cyber criminals, even nation states in some cases,
Yeah.
which completely changes the game, right?
Oh, it does. It really highlights how cybercrime has evolved into a global industry now. It's kind of unsettling to realize that these attackers have resources and expertise and a level of organization that rivals legitimate businesses.
Wow, so let's talk about like the weapons in their arsenal. The report mentions something called zero-day exploits, which just sounds absolutely terrifying, like
Yeah.
right out of a spy movie.
Yeah. They can be quite formidable. Think of it this way. Imagine a master thief finds a hidden passageway into a supposedly impenetrable vault. That's basically what a zero-day exploit is. It's a vulnerability that no one knows about, not even the people who created the software, which means there's no patch.
Oh, wow.
There's no fix available.
So like a secret back door they can slip through before anyone even knows it's there.
Yeah.
And the report points out a chilling example, the Stuxnet attack. That was a nation-state level operation, right?
It was. It targeted Iran's nuclear program.
Yeah.
And used a series of zero-day exploits to infiltrate and disrupt the systems. It was kind of a wake-up call for the cybersecurity world. It showed how these vulnerabilities could be weaponized on like a global scale.
It's like cyber warfare, but even more insidious.
Yeah.
Because it's happening under the radar. Okay, so we've established that these attacks are incredibly sophisticated. And the people behind them are well-resourced and organized. But it's not just like random chaos, right?
Yeah.
Behind the Breach really emphasizes that these attacks are targeted, like they have a plan.
Precisely. They're not just casting a wide net and seeing what they can catch. These attackers do their research. They identify high-value targets and then deploy very specific tactics to achieve their objective.
So what are some of those tactics? Because knowing what to look for seems pretty crucial here.
Well, the report highlights a few key methods. Phishing, for example, is still incredibly common. That's where they send these emails disguised as legitimate messages, trying to trick people into revealing sensitive information, like passwords or credit card numbers. And then there's malware injection, where malicious code is slipped into a system, often through downloads or by exploiting vulnerabilities on websites.
So it's like a combination of social engineering and technical trickery, exploiting human weaknesses as well as technological vulnerabilities. And that brings us to maybe the most disturbing part of this report.
Right.
A major factor in a lot of these breaches is lack of preparedness.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme, unfortunately. A lot of organizations, even ones with substantial resources, they just aren't doing enough to protect themselves. They fail to implement strong security measures. They're not conducting regular checks for vulnerabilities. And they often neglect employee training, which is so critical.
Wow, so even big companies with tons of resources are dropping the ball. On basic cybersecurity hygiene, it's almost reassuring in a strange way. Like, we all make mistakes, but it also makes you realize how important it is to learn from these cases and not assume it can't happen to you.
Absolutely. If the giants can stumble, imagine the risks for smaller businesses or individuals who may not have dedicated cybersecurity teams.
All right, so we've established that the threats are real, the attackers are serious, and a lot of organizations are leaving themselves wide open to attack. But before we dive into, like, the solutions, let's take a moment to grasp the impact. This report doesn't shy away from the consequences of a successful cyber attack.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't.
No, the consequences can be really far-reaching and damaging.
Yeah. For companies, think massive financial losses, damage to their reputation, which can take years to repair, and even potential legal ramifications. It's enough to make any CEO lose sleep.
For sure. And for individuals, the impact can be just as devastating. We're talking about identity theft, stolen financial information, and the sheer headache of dealing with the fallout. It can disrupt your life in a very real and tangible way.
It's like a digital domino effect. and it can touch every aspect of our lives. So this stuff is serious business, but don't worry, we're not going to leave you hanging in a pit of cyber despair. Behind the Breach also gives some really solid advice on how to fight back. We'll get to that in the next part of our deep dive.
There's always something we can do to improve our security and reduce our risk.
So stay tuned, because knowing is half the battle.
Okay, so we've seen how damaging these cyber attacks can be. But I'm ready for some good news. What I'm hearing from behind the breach is that we're not powerless. Like, there are things we can actually do to protect ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. This report doesn't just lay out the problems, it actually offers some really practical advice on how to strengthen our defenses.
Okay, hit me with it. What are those, key takeaways? What are the most effective strategies for, fighting back against these cyber threats?
Well, the report really emphasizes that awareness is absolute fundamental. I mean, you can't defend against something you don't understand. Right?
Yeah, it's like trying to fight a shadow. So how do we bring these threats into the light? What does awareness actually look like in practice? It starts with education, educating ourselves about the common tactics attackers use. Like, for example, let's go back to phishing. Just understanding how these scams work, how to spot a suspicious email. That can significantly reduce your risk. One simple trick is to hover over any links before you click them to see the actual web address. If it looks fishy, don't click.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, trust but verify, right? Don't just blindly click on anything that lands in your inbox.
Yeah.
So knowledge is our armor in this digital battle. But what else can we do to, fortify our defenses?
Well, the report is a big advocate for what they call the multi-layered defense approach. Think of it like securing your home. You wouldn't just rely on a single lock on your front door, right? You might have deadbolts, an alarm system, maybe even some motion-activated lights. Each layer adds an extra level of protection.
Right, I'm getting the picture. So what are some of the layers we should be thinking about in the digital world?
Well, there are several key elements. Firewalls are essential. They act as a barrier between your computer or network and the outside world, blocking any unauthorized access attempts. It's like having a security guard at the entrance, checking credentials and turning away anyone who doesn't belong.
Okay, I've definitely heard of firewalls, but I'll admit I don't really understand how they work.
Basically, every device connected to the internet has what's called an IP address, which is like its unique street address. And a firewall uses rules to filter incoming and outgoing network traffic based on things like the source IP address, the destination port, and the type of protocol being used. So if the traffic matches a rule that's set to block, the firewall will prevent it from reaching your device.
Ah, okay, so it's like a bouncer at a club, only allowing in the traffic that meets the right criteria. Got it.
Yeah.
So what other security layers should we be thinking about?
Intrusion detection systems are another really critical piece of the puzzle. They act like your digital security cameras, constantly monitoring your network for any suspicious activity. If they detect something unusual, they can trigger an alert or even take automated actions to block the threat.
So it's like having a watchdog that never sleeps, always on the lookout for trouble.
Exactly. And then there's endpoint protection software. This focuses on securing individual devices, like laptops and smartphones. It includes things like antivirus software, anti-malware programs, and tools for managing software updates.
Right, because each device is a potential entry point for an attacker. So you can't just secure the network, you have to secure each individual device that connects to it.
Precisely. It's about creating a comprehensive security posture that covers all your bases. And then there's data encryption, which is another incredibly powerful tool. It basically scrambles your information, making it unreadable to anyone who doesn't have the decryption key.
So even if an attacker manages to get their hands on my data, it's just a jumbled mess without the key. That's reassuring. But even with all these layers in place, isn't it still possible for vulnerabilities to slip through the cracks? I mean, no system is perfect, right?
You're absolutely right. That's why the report stresses the importance of regular security assessments and audits. It's kind of like getting regular checkups at the doctor. You might feel fine, but it's always good to get a professional opinion and catch any potential issues early on.
Okay, that makes sense. But what do these security assessments actually involve?
Well, they can include things like vulnerability scanning, which uses automated tools to identify known weaknesses in your systems. And there's also penetration testing, where ethical hackers, working with your permission, of course, actually try to break into your systems to find vulnerabilities.
So we're actually hiring friendly hackers to attack our systems. That's pretty wild.
It's a proactive approach. It's better to find and fix those weaknesses before the bad guys do. And it's not just about finding the vulnerabilities, it's about understanding how an attacker might exploit them and what the potential impact could be.
Okay, so we're constantly checking for weaknesses
Mm-hmm.
and patching them up before they can be exploited.
Yeah.
What else does Behind the Breach recommend?
One concept that's gaining a lot of traction these days is the zero trust security model. It sounds a bit extreme, but it's based on a simple idea. Don't trust anyone, verify everything.
Zero trust. I like the sound of that. No blind faith, just constant vigilance. But how does that actually work in practice?
Well, it means assuming that every device, every user, even those inside your organization, could potentially be compromised. So you implement strict access controls, multi-factor authentication, and continuous monitoring to verify the legitimacy of every request.
So even if someone manages to slip past one layer of security, they're constantly being challenged and verified at every step. It's like having to show your ID every time you walk through a door.
Exactly. It's about minimizing the potential damage, even if a breach does occur. And it's not just about technology. It's about changing your mindset and creating a culture of security awareness throughout your organization.
This is all starting to sound like a really complex puzzle with lots of interlocking pieces. It's a bit overwhelming, to be honest.
It is complex, but the good news is that we don't have to figure it out alone. The report emphasizes the importance of collaboration and information sharing.
Right, because the bad guys are sharing information and collaborating, so we need to do the same, right?
Exactly. Organizations, even competitors in some cases, are increasingly working together to stay ahead of the cybercriminals. They're sharing information about threats, attack methods, vulnerabilities, best practices, all of that.
It's like a global cybersecurity community, all working together to keep the internet safe.
Kind of heartwarming in a way. So where can people go to tap into this network?
Of knowledge and support.
Well, there are several great resources. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA for short, it's a U.S. government agency, that provides a wealth of information and guidance on cybersecurity best practices. There are also industry groups like ISICA and ISC2 that offer certifications, training, and networking opportunities for cybersecurity professionals. And don't forget about online communities and forums, where people share their experiences and expertise.
It's like crowdsourcing cybersecurity knowledge. The more we share, the stronger we become.
Okay, but even with all these proactive measures in place, it feels like we still need to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. What happens if, despite our best efforts, an attack does get through?
Well, that's where incident response planning comes in. It's like having a fire escape plan. You hope you never have to use it. But if you do, you need to know what to do, who to contact, and how to minimize the damage.
So it's about having a clear plan of action in place, ready to go in case of a cyber emergency. Exactly. It involves things like establishing clear communication channels, designating roles and responsibilities, and practicing your response procedures, so everyone knows what to do in the heat of the moment.
It sounds like preparation is key. The more you plan and practice, the better equipped you'll be to handle a crisis.
Absolutely. It's about turning a potential disaster into a manageable setback. And one of the most important things is to have a way to quickly isolate affected systems to prevent the attack from spreading.
It's like containing a fire. You want to stop it from spreading,
Yeah.
and then focus on putting it out.
That's a great analogy. And part of incident response is also about learning from the experience. After the dust settles, you need to conduct a thorough analysis to understand what happened, how it happened, and what you can do to prevent it from happening again.
It's about turning a negative experience into a learning opportunity. And speaking of learning opportunities, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, information sharing. The Behind the Breach report keeps mentioning a specific location, the Gold Coast, as being like a hub for cybersecurity collaboration.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? You wouldn't necessarily think of a sunny paradise like the Gold Coast as being at the forefront of cybersecurity.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, what's happening there? What's so special about the Gold Coast when it comes to cybersecurity?
Well, according to the report, the Gold Coast has developed a thriving cybersecurity ecosystem with a strong concentration of businesses, research institutions, and government agencies, all focused on this critical area.
So it's like Silicon Valley, but for cybersecurity.
In a way, yeah. It seems they've created a really collaborative environment where information is shared freely and innovation is encouraged. They're even hosting major cybersecurity conferences and events, attracting experts from all over the world.
It sounds like they're taking a very proactive and strategic approach to cybersecurity. I'm curious to learn more about their specific initiatives and what lessons we can learn from their success.
Yeah, I agree. The Gold Coast model seems to be working, so it's definitely worth exploring further. Perhaps their approach to collaboration and information sharing could be replicated in other regions.
So if even a place like the Gold Coast is facing these threats, it really highlights that cybersecurity is a global issue.
It does. It really underscores how interconnected the digital world is. These threats can really come from anywhere.
Yeah, it feels like we've gone on quite a journey today. From feeling a bit overwhelmed by like the scale of these attacks
Yeah.
to understanding the tactics, and then most importantly, learning practical steps that we can take
Right.
to protect ourselves.
We've done a deep dive in the truest sense of the word. And while we've covered a lot, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. Cybersecurity is constantly evolving.
So our learning never really ends, right?
Absolutely. But that's also what makes it so fascinating. There's always something new to discover, new challenges to tackle, new ways to outsmart the bad guys.
So before we wrap up, what's like the one big takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with today?
I would say it's this. We can't eliminate risk entirely, but by being informed and proactive and taking practical steps to strengthen our defenses, we can significantly reduce our vulnerability. In this digital age,
Beautifully put. And remember, folks, this deep dive is just the beginning. There are tons of resources out there to help you continue your cybersecurity journey. Don't be afraid to explore, ask questions, and most importantly, take action to protect yourselves and your valuable data. Stay safe out there in the digital world, everyone.